Welcome, misfits, to this episode of Talk Skeptic To Me.
Do it to me.
Sacredness in Archaeological Approach. Oh my. Where, just as stated, we are going to be taking an archaeological approach to sacredness with our special guest host, Pat Lowinger, as he joins James W. and myself, Amy Newman, for some skeptical fun.
Skeptic talking.
Well, looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to it. And all right, I want to thank everyone out there for joining us on the Intertubes. If you're feeling fancy, don't forget to like, follow, or subscribe. And of course, activate your 5G if you've just gotten your booster shot. Is it coming through? Oh, there we go. Thank you.
It's actually in the deodorant, so when you rate, they put it in there now, like the aluminum in there. It helps you receive the signals from the Illuminati better. Yeah,
boop, boop, boop. That's how it all works. But yes, I would also like to send out reminders. Hit that bell icon because that's how you join our live streams.
And the bell looks just like. Never mind.
And you can also find our Patreon page at patreon.com/Amy Newman, woohoo, which helps us make even more fun content, including Went for the Head, KO Champ, but also Eyes from the Atheist Roundtable and Tang
that network thing. Oh God.
Yes, send in love over to Tang. Our butts were just over there. Send in love Tang.live. I'm so used to Tart.live, though both
it'll
websites
still link to it. Yeah, it'll
exactly. And get ready for better.
Got a few months to get ready now, so.
That's right, which means more months to buy even more tickets and get even more skeptics and make it even better.
Send them this one. Buy them and send them over here.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
I'm going to be heading over there. I am ready whenever I want to link up because, like I keep on saying, the one half semi-baked concept that the theists have done well was community. And so I would like to not only emulate that, but we could do it even
better.
There you go. Thank you, Pat.
You're a little behind, like Israel Schmishmail.
I can't help myself.
Yes.
I have my shticks, ladies and gentlemen. But yes, send a love to us.
For sticks
too. But also Ian Davenport. Level up. But also not just Ian, but as we listen to many creationist claims, it kind of makes us go and a grumpy old
yeah. As we listen to praise, talking crap about Pat, Dr. Josh, and Dr. Jim, we go crazy.
Oh, well.
Pat has acquainted himself with praise, I am that I am.
The real experts, it could be Dr. Jim Majors or Dr. Josh, or it could be Pat as he's getting his PhD, but no. It's the real experts, sir.
Ken Hovind.
I'm not religious, but if you keep saying I'm going to get it, you'll jinx it. Just remember that. We don't want to jinx it.
No.
Don't carve it into stone yet. Oops.
I mean, I'm not superstitious. I just know how hard.
That's right, baby.
You're writing in defense of your dissertation is. So
if
I don't want to.
One thing you can't say on this channel, it's how hard.
Yeah. Exactly.
No. I know you're gonna get it because you're badass.
He is a
sending
we'll come back in about 3 years.
Also to the fabulous Diana Smith.
Diana Smith. Thank you, Diana.
3 princesses in 1. I think that makes an ultra princess. That's how that logic works.
Hyper princess.
Hyper princess, super princess. You can just throw that around, apparently, that word. But also, the one, the only, our special guest tonight, Pat Lowinger. We're taking an archaeological approach. Well, he is, but the 2 schmucks here also. We'll pretend.
We're just talking shit.
Woohoo! Sending love, Pat. And also, we normally get asked what would convince us. And then, we give the answer, which is generally empirical evidence, and then that just gets striked out.
Evidence! They want evidence!
And not just evidence, James, but evidence in the natural world. Come on. Why would you want it in the natural world?
Really? Really, Newman?
Yeah. Sounds silly to me.
You want it to be real?
Real?
Yeah.
Almost like you can pick something up and feel it. Oh, but the winds, you can't feel that. Well, we can kind of feel that. It has visual effects.
Can you feel something 15 foot long?
There are... Woohoo! Why, yes, we can. But there are some things we can't detect with our eyes. The infrared. A good example of something we can't detect.
Neutrinos,
and it doesn't
X-rays,
get anything that bop on us. Though, I will say, if you stand in certain lights long enough, you will see the effects eventually. But yeah, there are things we need to verify with other people and with instruments. Amazing.
Or if you just spray it on your skin, it'll look like you stayed in front of that light, like the bronzer spray tan.
That's also one way.
Yeah.
That's the cheapo way. But the orange way.
Yeah, the orange.
Yes. But sending love, not to Dale. Oh my, as I just come back from moderating. Damn. Sending love. I mean, I can't help it. Maybe I'm biased. It just looks
You are very biased, yeah.
I don't know. Looks round.
The globe model, it describes like day and night, the seasons. I mean, it describes so many things. But do we really know? Do we know? Like eclipses, it describes that pretty well. It describes kind of everything very well. Nothing that doesn't describe very well, but do we still know?
Yeah, I don't know. You'd have to trust your eyes and data that was given to you by someone else and
government,
the government, something or another. Yeah. So think about
your NASA flag back there, but
I know.
We're flying the NASA colors.
I am a NASA shill. I will straight up admit it. When it's moderating in a debate, I will give you
15 degrees per hour.
Ooh. I'll always try to be fair when moderating a debate, but I am a little bit team round. Still love everybody though.
Team Dave Gar.
Little bit team Dave Gar. Dave Gar was in chat.
He's in chat right now.
Is he really sending?
Yeah, he's in chat right now. Dave Gar. Dave Gar.
Dave Gar. Round Earth. Dave Gar. And I love his pony avatar. I should have had a pony thing, just like I have my kitties, but I can't help it. I kind of
like John Peterson's horse avatar.
Woohoo! I do have what's it called? That's not quite the same.
Chaps and spurs.
I mean, this will get a horse a running. But also get
a preacher running.
A preacher running. That's right. All the things that you can make
18
run
hours
with
a
a
day,
wonderful whip.
Preacher. 18 hours a day.
But sending love to Dave Gore, and also sending love to Scott Duke.
Scott Duke. There you go.
The lead hyena of the pack.
Pumbaa.
Timon and Pumbaa. I like generally the ones that become musicals, but they just did hyenas wrong, okay?
Yeah.
But yes, last but not least, and love you, Scott Duke. Last but not least, our thespian skull, our skeptic Bible study.
Our Bible study buddy.
Thou shalt drown like everybody. Wow.
I am the Lord thy God, who rescued thee out of the land of Egypt. After I, the Lord thy God, got thee stuck in the land of Egypt, but I got thee out, so don't complain, or I will kill thee.
Put you in there, I took you out, and I could put you back in.
If you don't like it, I'll kill you.
Or I'll kill you. Yeah, basically.
Complaint department?
Yeah. Complaint department.
Yeah. It's right, basically the same thing as the guy who pushed you down the stairs offers to drive you to the hospital and then tells you, hey, by the way, I did you a solid favor. Right?
Exactly. What a nice
gives you
guy,
a bill,
right?
A bill for the transit. Like, hey.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't
never let you live it down.
But didn't you throw me down oh, that's the past. Are you going to live in the past? I helped you now.
Let's not focus on the violence I did towards you. Let's focus on the drive to the hospital. And hey, by the way, you can buy me a beer.
And then worship
every
me forever.
Time you see me. Right. Every time you see me, you can buy me a beer.
Forever. Praise me.
Yep. Such a nice guy. But yes, we'd love to send all of our thanks and hearts to all of our Patreons, along with our awesome mods out there and viewers like you who make this entire channel
our
possible.
Our badass subscribers, those on the Discord, our mods, Patreons. We love you guys.
We love all of you. And all right. With that, we are going to introduce Pat Lowinger is a historian, freelance writer, and educator. Patrick possesses an MA in ancient history from American Military University and an MA in archaeology from the University of Leicester. In addition to teaching, Pat is currently conducting research in pursuit of a PhD in ancient Mediterranean studies. So with that, Pat, the floor is yours. What is the video we're going to be watching tonight?
Well, again, thanks for James and yourself for having me on, Amy. So a few weeks ago, we were having a discussion in Discord, and people were like, well, we know what Dr. Josh does. He studies the ancient Mesopotamian cultures, the Assyrians and the Babylonians. And then they turn to Dr. Jim, and they go, Dr. Jim made a detailed study of the Old Testament from the original Hebrew and the book of Daniel. And what'd you do, Pat? I go, well, my research is on phenomenology. I'm like, what's that? I'm like, well, basically, how do archaeologists analyze landscapes and sacred sites to determine how they were used over multiple generations and various time periods? And heard crickets. So we thought we'd do this show to explain a little bit about placemaking theory and how archaeologists and anthropologists and other related disciplines determine how a site was used, what it was used for, what are the historical and cultural contexts in which, something like for example, Stonehenge, how it was used in antiquity, and why was it inherited by future generations and different people who came into the period. One common thing is the Druids didn't build Stonehenge, right? The ancient Celts didn't build it. Previous people did, but then the Celts inherited it, and they established their own, religious practices at the site or adjacent to the site based on archaeology. So, with that, we're going to start with a short video that I put together yesterday. This is known as the Chapel and Well at Modern. It's a Cornish site. I don't speak Cornish, so sometimes you'll realize that the words don't actually sound like they're spelled. Just go with it. It's Cornish. And the site is really fascinating. And I'll let the video speak for itself. Then after that, we'll take a few quick questions from James and Amy, and then I'll do a short presentation and turn over the discussion to everybody else who wants to be involved. So, all right.
Sounds good, Pat. Thank you.
Woohoo! And all right. With that, we're going to begin the Talk Skeptic to Me of Sacredness in Archaeological Approach, where, just as stated, we're going to be taking an archaeological approach to sacredness with our special guest host, Pat Lowinger. So that we can let our guest focus, we're going to be holding the comments until the Q&A section at the end. However, you could tag me at Amy Newman.
She loves it. She can't get
it. So that we can have fun. And all right, with that, we are moving in.
Woohoo. All right, Pat.
Woohoo! Sending love to everyone out there, and let the fun begin.
Got the sound on?
I think it may take a second.
Yeah, the sound doesn't start till about halfway through.
Okay.
We're talking low production value here.
I'm just making sure it was activated, yeah.
And I'm actually going to read this. So, then Natural Well, Surface Spring, and 12th Century Stone Chapel are located approximately 1.5 kilometer from the village of Mandarin. Despite being open to the public, the site is privately owned and described as a wishing well. It has been suggested that the chapel foundation predates the later construction of the chapel in the 12th century. Absent an in-depth archaeological examination of the site, any assertions of the existence of an earlier chapel dated to the 6th through the 8th century CE remain highly speculative.
And I'd like to apologize because I've already noticed my first typo. It's the Natural Well. But hey, that's just what happens when you spell a word correctly at 3 o'clock in the morning and don't catch it during the proof.
And I'm the queen of typos, so I could hardly say anything.
Hardly?
Yeah. Shake weights.
You can say Madrone or Madarin. Madarin is the Cornish pronunciation of the place. Madarin, yep.
Sounds like rhymes with patron.
Well, you know what? We're getting requests for Pat's to read his writing, so I'm handing it over to you, Pat.
You want to read it, Pat?
All right. Yeah, I can read it. Despite being referred to as a single site, in fact, the Holy Well is located approximately 200 meters to the west of the chapel and is marked by a series of stones. The pool of water which forms at this location creates a marshy environment which feeds a small stream. The chapel and well are the source of many local legends and customs. One folk tale asserts that the spring located at Madrone's Well was used by the ancient Celts as a site of religious rituals. While certainly possible, without archaeological excavation, such conjecture remains hypothetical. And there's a little bit more to that I'll talk about when we go in there, but there is some tentative evidence, objects found outside the well area that are indicative of Iron Age use. So.
Professor
I did make
Voice
sure
is
there was
awesome.
enough time to read it because, yeah, Natalie actually said that I had to leave more time for folks to read my videos. So I worked on that on this one. And you can actually see the relationship, how far the sites are from each other, that 200 meters right there. The site gets its name from association with a Cornish hermit saint, Saint Madarin or Madron, who reportedly lived during the 6th century. We don't have a lot of information on this guy other than he received sainthood during the 6th century, traveled back and forth between Brittany and Cornwall. In addition to Madron's well and chapel, Saint Madron, also known as Madarin, is the patron saint of many churches in Cornwall and Brittany. So we do believe he actually existed. The saint is formally remembered on May 17th each year, and his troparion is as follows, like his little saying that they say in remembrance of him.
Saint Madron.
Mm-hmm. So
he's ready to go, Newman.
There's actually, yeah. Well,
No,
it's just playing. It's playing. So
oh, okay.
I'm probably gonna say Madarin, right? So, and this is his saying: "Out of pagan darkness in the land of Cornwall, thou didst shine as a witness to Christ. Holy hermit Madarin, entreat him that the light thou didst kindle may ever shine in our hearts." That's like his invocation of him as a saint, his special saying.
He was canonized Catholic Church.
Yeah, he's very large in the Cornish Church and in Brittany, northern France. Yeah.
Holy hermit, that's right.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that's actually he is a hermit saint. That's actually a special designation. He traveled. He took vows of poverty. He didn't live in one place. Didn't have a church established in his name while he was alive. There's all kinds of lore regarding him, but nothing that we can really nothing that I've been able to dig up solid yet as far as
kind of like Obi-Wan Kenobi.
Right, exactly. But just by example, in many ways he's like Saint Patrick for the Cornish, just so you know.
Okay. He didn't drive the snakes out of England, though.
No. So the chapel itself is relatively small. The exterior dimensions are 12 by 20. You'll see that here. The walls are about 2 feet thick. And it's been the site's been cleaned up but not really excavated, so you'll see some pictures of that in a short video.
What time period, Pat?
This church was built in the late 11th or early 12th century.
Yeah, St. Patrick is from chasing the snakes out of Ireland. That's why there's no snakes in Ireland. That's why they revere St. Patrick. Only island in the world with no snakes. Go figure.
Don't step on snake.
Right. Watch out for snakes.
So that's the baptistry there. When the chapel was in use, it was almost always filled with water from the local spring, which lets water leach into this area. There's also still remains a stone altar, which you'll see in a second.
How long has it been out of use for?
It was actually partially damaged during the English Civil War. So it's been out of use for quite some time. Archaeologically speaking, it's in pretty good shape. The conservation, despite seeing all of the ferns and everything, is actually pretty good.
Yeah.
Very pretty.
It'd be amazing to have an artist try rendition what it might have looked like when it was in use.
Oh, there are a couple, and actually that's part of my research. I just didn't put it in here because the images are copyright, and I don't want to put them out before I have permission from the author. Stonework's indicative of, the period. So, part of what I did was go through and take other notes that are, for publication, but it looks like the walls are dated to the period appropriately. So, and I wasn't able to determine anything about the foundation. Although often absent of water today, the baptistry does occasionally fill with water, apparently via ground seepage. And you'll see another secondary well pool. So since we're stopping the video, you'll often see sites. Madarin will be explained as having two wells, one at the church and one they'll call the ancient well or the wishing well, which is that natural surface well that is 200 meters from the chapel. So the water is believed by locals to possess miraculous healing properties. It was reported that during the 12th century that a paraplegic named John Trilili came to the site, and after he had bathed in the well water 3 times, was healed. The wondrous nature of the healing was verified by the then Bishop of Exeter, which formally recognized and established this site and the sacred nature of the site and the church, which in turn enhanced the reputation among Christian pilgrims during the medieval period. And we do know that locally in Cornwall, which is actually a pretty big region, this site is going to be, pilgrims are going to venture this site during the medieval period in order to seek healing for a variety of afflictions. But typically infirmits or arthritises, things like that, but also occasionally blindness and other things. And again, Nat said I had to give people long enough to actually read it on their own, so that's why there's like 22 seconds or something like that. The waters which are from the spring, the waters arise from the spring are still considered sacred today, both by Christians, modern pagans, and those who simply identify themselves as spiritual. Now, I feel comfortable saying that because I actually interviewed some people. So I tried to enter over 20. I had 12 people that were willing to actually talk to me. I had a couple people that I initially started talking to when they found out what I was doing. They kind of withdrew their consent for interview. So I actually ended up with 13, which I knocked down to 12 interviews. Because I think one person was kind of pulling my leg. I don't think they were being honest in their interview. At the wellspring and to a lesser extent at the church, many visitors come to Madarin in search of divine healings and to beseech a variety of blessings by bathing in the spring's waters or depositing a variety of sacred objects at the site. One common tradition is the tying of strips of cloth known as kulti. And just so you know, in Cornwall and in Wales, this is a common thing, is tying a strip of cloth to a tree near a sacred site. You tie them to trees that are located near the spring in the church.
Seepage water is sacred.
So this is just one picture, and you'll see several more. You can just let it run, Amy. They're all over the place. So I actually counted, and I stopped counting when I got to 300 because I was having to climb back in bushes and do all kinds of things. And I figured when I return next year, I'll actually take 2 days at this site and count everything that is actually present. Count them all. I was limited. I only had half a day on the site, and I had to do measurements and do other things and some other stuff that I had to get done. But I stopped it. I figured when I hit 300, and there was still a lot more to do that I wasn't going to get done.
You're like 300. I think that should be good.
Like the movie.
Well, luckily there was a couple colleagues. One that you see in the photo there. Without her and another colleague, the two of them, I wouldn't even be able to count the 300 because some of them were really high in trees. Some of them had fallen to the ground, so they're still there. They just you're picking up
climbing trees.
Right. So it's I did get some detailed pictures of some of them, and I think you'll find interesting. And you don't have to stop it, Amy, but a lot of people actually write their names on these. Like they'll, put their name, then tie it in the tree, do things like that. Some of them actually have like prayers written on them. Some of them are highly detailed. Some of them are just simply strips of cloth with no description or anything on them. So it's quite a variety of things you'll find at the site.
I wonder how long they would last out there, like in the elements.
So some people were telling me they've been coming for years, and they pointed to items they had left years ago, right? So one lady was extremely knowledgeable of the site, so I used her information to form a little bit of my preliminary report, because she was actually with Cornish Heritage, so that always helps.
Long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Just stop it.
Let it play.
A second.
Those look very ornate, like the designs on
They
it.
are.
You can see
it's like a streamer. It's like a streamer. I actually the inclusion of prayers and in Cornish and English are pretty common. Cornish is a revival language, so it nearly died out in the early 1900s, but then was revived. And right now, I think approximately 3 to 5% of the population actually speak Cornish now. So it's very common to see Cornish used in signage and letters and things like this that are publicly.
Is it a more Anglo-Saxonized language?
No, it's similar to the native Celt. It's not too dissimilar from Welsh.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Are they? They look like they're. Are they individually written or?
Well, no. This was produced. Though each of those panels is identical or similar. They're not identical, but it's a storyboard, and I actually am currently working on a little bit of this. I don't want to talk about it in too much detail because it's pretty interesting. I'm presented a talk. A little bit of a spoiler. Yeah.
Is it alternated, like one side, each one faces the other side?
They're only printed. They're only printed on one side. Yeah.
So they alternate on one side facing then the other. Okay.
Right. It's a streamer, and it's like it's like a party streamer.
How long would that one have been there? For instance, like any.
So stuff like this appears every few years, and when one of the issues with surveying the site, I mean, don't feel bad for Pat, but every once in a while, the owners of the property, like I said, it's privately owned, they will come and take everything down, especially stuff that's fallen to the ground. And so then all of a sudden it'll repopulate over the next couple of years. And then again, as stuff becomes too raggedy and it starts falling from the trees, there's occasional cleanups along the path. And particularly in the Sacred Spring area, things that fall in, they're removed because they're basically just rotting in the ground, and the owner doesn't want to have, trash basically. So it's a little bit of conservation in addition to just keeping the site looking more tidy. That's not what I would do, but that's just me. I'd collect it all, put it in garbage bags, and give it to a guy like me so I could go through it and look at it year after year after year.
Hey,
that's the archaeologist in me, right? Correct. Yeah.
It becomes part of history almost at that point.
Right. So this is an example of what I call a more common looking type of, now what I'm calling this is an invocatio, right? This is an invocation to the divine. This is, you understand people, if this is a wishing well, it's not, but that's what some locals see it as. I wish for a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year, right? This is like one of the very common, you wouldn't think it's that, you're like, oh, just wishing a Happy New Year. That's one of them. And there are several others, some which I took notes of. Some were, again, I didn't include them in this video because they're subject to part of what I'm writing up. But I discuss a variety of them in the next few slides. It's quite varied as far as what people come here in order to try to receive favor of a divine nature.
Gotta tempt that god, right?
Next thing you'll see Will Stewart there with
So the variety of wishes, prayers, and thoughts deposited at the wellspring are truly stunning, and I can't describe it. As I was cataloging this, part of cataloging is taking a picture, writing down the description of the piece. That's why when I said 300, I'm stopping and looking at every piece, right? Now, there were a few, or the most of them were like, you know, I'm wishing Jen a happy birthday, things like the ones that we just saw as an example. But there were some that appeared in this one. The first case, there was one looked like it was written by a child as far as how the handwriting was done. Although it could have been someone that was elderly, but there was obviously some issues with, you know, eye-hand coordination on the card that had been left. And it said, "Take my cat to heaven," was one of them that I found that I thought was notable. Another one was, again, like personal, may I get my birthday wish? That birthday wishes, happy birthday, seem to be very common. But there were also a few that were notable. And one was, it was, you know, written on a card that was hanging on a strip that said, "Take my cancer from me," with no name associated with it. And another one was at another part, which appeared to have been written in a different area, was it looked like it said "please," but I couldn't read the first part because weathering had happened. But it said "heal Jonathan," so there was some script, and then "heal Jonathan." It looked like "please," and then the card was slightly damaged and been weathered, so I couldn't get the whole everything that was on it. But it was discernibly, the last portion of it said "heal Jonathan." So again, the miraculous nature of the healing seems to still be part of the tradition here, although other people have included a more, what I call, gentle version of touching the divine, right? It's more of like just wishful thinking rather than actual invocation. You know, blowing out your candles on your cake. Very few people nowadays think that actually does anything. And in many cases, after interviewing some of the people that are there, they're just doing it because it's quote unquote nice thoughts, not necessarily because they believe it actually has a magical or deific effect. Although a couple people did, you know. So again, mixture as far as religiosity towards the site, that was definitely mixed during my my interviews there. The invocations are varied as well. Right. And they ranged from God with capital G, so we assume it's the Abrahamic God. Jesus was invoked in many of these cards, or in many of the pieces. The goddess was invoked several times, and so the goddess was invoked, and then spirits, sometimes spirits of the waters, and I'm assume that meant to the site itself, given the nature and the context in which the items were deposited and left. So, you know, there were, at least in my survey, 4 different identifiable divinities invoked. And if you're a Trinitarian, God and Jesus only count as one. If you're not, it's two.
So a multi-religion site, really a lot of different ideas going on there.
Right. And that's part of the reason it's so important in my research, and we'll talk about that in a little bit.
All right. We're, I think, about 2/3 through this video, but then we are going to open up for some Q&A and finally head over to the Discord if you want some voice questions as well for Pat. So as much Pat as you want, baby, but we are moving forward as we are Talk Skeptic to Me, Sacredness in Archaeological Approach.
Although there are less kuthes hung in the trees near the chapel and adjacent baptistry well, there are several objects deposited on a stone altar, one of which was a picture frame commemorating the passing of a beloved family member. Other objects included flowers, stones, and coin. I can tell you that the decedent was a teenager, and for that reason, that's the reason you don't have a detailed picture of the person that had passed, for reasons regarding my research. There are, even at the chapel, which is a secondary site from the actual spring, there is again an additional layer of attestation to the divine at the site. So there's 2 deposit locations. They're not necessarily identical, but they do work in unison with each other as far as the sacredness that's perceived at the site. At least that's my theory. That's a small well. It's a cistern that collects water. You can just keep going to the rear of the chapel, so that helps the baptistry fill when rain occurs. If you continue on, you'll see there's a set of trees, and on the ground there's some blue markings. There's people left painted stones on the ground there, and continuing forward, you'll see some things hanging in the background from the trees. So again, Kuthis are present in this area as well, and you can see they're all in the background hanging. It looks like leaves, but it's not. It's like yellow, pink, purple. Right in that area right there, you'll see them hanging. And then I took a survey of those as well. But there's only about 30 in this area, so it was a lot easier to do at the chapel than it was out at the spring. That's the altar inside the chapel, a little closer up, and there's that picture frame. Up there also were some coins, other objects, some stones, some flowers that had been picked from the field, so like natural wildflowers had been left there. They had dried out, and so they're hard to tell what they are until you go up and get a closer inspection. But so some people are depositing objects at the well itself. Some people are depositing objects inside the chapel, but both sites are currently in usage at this point. They both seem to be receiving an amount. And one thing I haven't been able to determine is if the chapel had been recently cleaned up by the landowners and then the spring left alone, because I've been told by someone that there was a quote unquote a lot of objects at both sites. But when I was inspecting the chapel, I noticed that it looked like a lot of stuff if there was a lot, that's by comparison, there seemed to be some difference in the actual quantities. So I'll have to look into that a little further next year. In addition to the activities already discussed, as late as the end of the 19th century, young women would participate in a local May Day tradition at the site. May Day being associated with Celtic fertility, for those that want to get in that. Participants would come to the site before sunrise, young unmarried women. They perform a ceremony believed that would predict at what age they were going to be married. So 13, 14-year-olds would come. And this is, from someone who studies magic, this is a magical ritual of divination. Now, is it also a fertility ritual? I'm still looking into that, and I haven't ruled it out. But we can definitively show that what is going on here is possibly a fertility ritual, but definitely a ritual involving divination. Although the origins of the rituals remain unclear, as it was documented at the end of the 19th century, it's pretty clear that locals had been doing it for some time. Video come forward, and I actually was able to get some information on the ritual itself.
The woo is strong in Cornwall.
The ritual was apparently enacted by a participant taking 2 stems of grass. The grass is really thick in this area, so it's not like little blades of glass. They're pretty thick, anywhere from 1 inch to 1.5 inches long each. Fasten them together with a pin, and that's part of the archaeology here, is to look for these pins if I get a chance to. And then they were dropped in the water pooling around the spring, not into the spring itself, but the pools of water forming around it. And you can understand that a surface spring doesn't have water gurgling out of it. It just kind of pulls up the surface, forms like a shallow pond. At least in this instance, that's how it does. It was believed that after you threw this pin and these 2 strips of grass into the spring water, it would sink, and as it sunk, there would be bubbles would come off of the grass itself. If anybody's ever thrown stuff into water, you know that as something struck down, water usually air bubbles trail up behind it. You count the number of bubbles, and that would tell you how many years it was going to be before you married, and that was the common folklore of the tradition. Now, we do know that this was practiced and documented by local then archaeologists and antiquarians who were investigating the site back in 1890s. So it was still in use. The ritual was still being performed even at that time. Although there's no modern use of it today. I was unable to determine if the ritual is actually being conducted or if it's just people kind of doing different rituals in association with neo-pagan religious traditions that people are confusing with this earlier practice. And again, that's something I need to continue my research on. Well, this is, as in the case with many ancient landscapes, the site at Madern appears to be a palimpsest of traditions and religious practices, possibly originating as far back as pre-Christian Cornwall. Whether pagan or Christian, medieval or modern, the wellspring and chapel located at Madern, offer a unique glimpse not only to the intersection of various religious traditions of the past, but also grants investigators valuable insights to how this and other locations like it are ritually utilized today. That's kind of my overarching thesis of investigation of this site. So.
Thank you so very much, Pat. In fact, if you just joined us, we are Talk Skeptic To Me.
If you just joined it.
Sacredness in Archaeological Approach. And in a second, we're actually going to be switching into the Q&A, but I'm actually going to do this.
I did have a little presentation if you want me to do it.
I think he's going to do his presentation after the video, yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, well then ready up that presentation. I did have a...
Cue up the 70s porn music, Smokey.
And I already have one question ready, so keep on sending them in then, and tagging either James W. or myself, Amy Newman.
They will.
But all right.
Keep sending them. Keep sending it.
Okay. Are you ready? I mean, the video just continues on, thanks to the people that have made it possible for me to go to the site. So I don't know if we really need to.
Sure. Do you want me to play that? Do you want that or don't want that?
You don't need to. You don't need to.
Okay. Well, tell me when you have the other presentation, and I will swap it.
Well, and I'm ready.
No, it's just him. He's just going to be speaking. You got it?
I was going to say. I'll do my...
We'll see if this does it.
And I'm sending love everyone out there in the internet sphere. I see Rachel. Sending love, Rachel. What's that?
Do you see my presentation?
I see it is the same.
No, you have to make him. He's got to share his screen.
Yes, it is the same presentation. You have to stop sharing and then reshare, I think.
No, because it's on your screen. Or you have the video up, Amy.
Me? I do not.
No, I got it.
Okay.
And send us see Titan Uranus and Caffey, DeFreak, Doorknob, Natalie, Don Willis.
Who was that first one you said, Amy? I couldn't hear. I couldn't quite hear that. It cut
Rachel,
out.
Send it for Rachel.
Who was that? Titan?
And Titan, Uranus.
Oh, so you should see Titan's here.
Sweet. You should see my presentation now, right?
I will. So I'll bring up what I see.
Okay, because I have it on my screen. So,
are you screen sharing?
Yeah.
I don't see a screen share on mine. Try now.
What about James? Do you see James?
I don't see a screen share either.
Well, let me try one more time.
I stopped screen sharing. Maybe it was because I had it even in the background.
Yeah, that
it doesn't let anyone else screen share.
Yeah, I think that was it.
And you're not getting it, are you?
Did you send a screen share?
I'm presenting it. Yeah. Well, hold on. Let me do this. StreamYard. It's share. Okay, this should do it.
Oh, I see it. So you just got it through.
Okay. Here we go.
Whatever you just did is working now, baby.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for letting me have my technical difficulties. Hey,
Jamie.
If you're curious, yes, that's my picture from Stonehenge from this summer. We'll talk about Stonehenge another time. It's just a really cool picture, so I wanted to get it up there because Amy loves Stonehenge. Let's go ahead and quickly jump through what is sacredness, right? Sacredness, how do we define it? These are the theoretical considerations as I approach the site. Like, what do I have to be thinking about when I'm examining a site to determine its ritual and religious purpose, right? Or even if it has one. And in some cases, there may not be a religious significance to a site, or it may be partially obscured due to other issues and factors that could be present. But really, we have to ask ourselves, what is sacredness? And what does it mean for a place to be sacred? And what makes a place sacred? These are all questions investigators have to ask, particularly if they're working in this field of, again, this is landscape archaeology, placemaking theory, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. Why is a place held sacred by a person or group and not by another person or group? What makes something sacred to you may not necessarily be something someone else considers sacred. Within a community, how is sacredness of a locus or multiple loci developed and or maintained? Not just how is one site considered unique and sacred, but how would that possibly relate to other sacred sites in the region? And for example, it was very common in antiquity for people to conduct pilgrimages, both pagan and Christian, to multiple sites, right? Go to this site here, the other site there, and kind of form a circuit of sacredness. So you basically, what you do is you get a religious and ritual context forming. Do these sites evolve over time? My answer is yes, and if they do, how do they evolve? In many cases, they do. How do individual loci relate to the broader concept of a sacred landscape? Landscape being a larger perspective rather than just, something that's a couple hundred feet away from another. But what happens when one mountaintop and another mountaintop interact together in the formation of ritual of a period or multiple periods of history? How do archaeologists, anthropologists, and historians examine and hopefully answer these questions? Now, the picture you're seeing here I went to Wales in addition. This is St. Gwenffan's well on the Isle of Anglesey on Wales, the Holy Island. This site's kind of unique because there is a well, a natural spring on site that during the Christian period was adopted into a well, that the stone that you see there forms a basin and retention area for gathering water. It may have also served as an early Christian baptistry. There is a church that's built not too far away in the 7th century. Interestingly, though, there's all kinds of, I'll just give you the thumbnail sketch of the legends of this well. St. Gwenffan was a early Christian convent on the Isle of Anglesey. If you know anything about Anglesey, it's where the homes of the last Druids reportedly lived in ancient Wales. And legends of Druids going around and chasing and harming Christians who were corrupting and destroying the beliefs of the old faith were rampant during the period. St. Gwenffan was at one night near this well, see that cliff there that you can see in the background, was being chased by a group of Druids who were running her to her death and going to throw her off the cliff. But rather than jumping off the cliff or falling off the cliff as was there, which was going to be her fate, a group of angels carried her away, making not only the site itself sacred, but her role as a saint being granted to her, and increasing the site here. Gwenffan's well here is a site believed to heal not only sick and blind people, but also those suffering from mental illness. Now, the exact genesis of the context is important because some locals believe that actually that are more scoffing today believe that maybe Gwenffan threw herself to her death and that the local tradition grew up around her, although we have no evidence to support that. But there is an earlier Iron Age Celtic site of deposit just adjacent to where ancient Celts came and buried objects and made sacrifices to their gods in a ritualistic purpose, which is literally less than 100 meters away. So this well is adjacent to a site that was also used by a different group from an earlier time period.
Making is that the ocean? Is that salt water out there? Yeah,
that's the ocean. You're looking out into the North Sea right there. So just another example of a site being used multiple periods by multiple groups and similar contexts, but different religious views.
Just placemaking theory in a nutshell.
Right. Placemaking theory in a nutshell. Placemaking theory is an interdisciplinary approach to combining a broad cross-section of academic disciplines in order to understand the complex intersection of personal and societal feelings and beliefs, which ultimately lead to the establishment of sacredness, or something being sacred or culturally significant in a landscape. Supporting academic disciplines include, but aren't limited to, anthropology, archaeology, sociology, and psychology. This takes everybody. This is a big tent theoretical model. How do we assign sacredness? How do we evaluate it? And how do we actually not just project our own modern views into ancient cultures, and even in some cases modern cultures, when we're trying to analyze what makes something sacred to a group that we may not have a modern context and modern analogy to actually draw upon. The key concepts or consideration include something known as experientiality. That's like, how does a place make you feel? Phenomenology. Is there anything that is phenomenological about the site? For example, the aurora borealis is one of the most commonly invoked. It's a natural phenomenon that's psychologists and sociologists have studied, that elucidate thoughts and perceptions of supernatural causation in the cultures which observe them in antiquity. And then there's also the process of cultural memory. How's lore and religious traditions and the sacredness of a site passed down from one generation to another, and sometimes across generational boundaries and occasionally outside cultural groups, from one group of people to another. And these are all important concepts within placemaking theory, all of which are examining, evaluating, and attempt to determine why a particular locus, or that's an individual site, was considered sacred in an ancient context. That's why Pat needs to read better, because he cut and paste there, and we'll just fix that later. How is a raw landscape transformed into one that which is sacred? If nothing's there before, what actually helps a place being assigned status of being sacred? Is it because it's beautiful and there's this natural phenomenology or experientiality that manifests feelings and emotions that have a cultural affirmation as being spiritual and or religious, and that is enough to give this site that label, or indicate that it should be used for that purpose? Is it part of the religious belief system of liminal places and quote unquote places where the veil between the real world or the spiritual world become thin? Sometimes they're referred to as narrow places in Celtic mythology. In other cases, landscapes can be modified by a group in which turn enhance the site's sacredness, such as on monuments and temples. Examples, the erection of numerous stone circles throughout the United Kingdom and Ireland. Now, stone circles are going to be something that is going to be a focus of my research, because they seem to be used from the late Neolithic through up to and including the period of Roman occupation, which is going to be the focal point of my study. So again, there are quite a few things going on over multiple periods of time. Sometimes the people who built the objects had a completely different ritualistic purposes than what people 1,000 years later are using it for. And that's actually one of the issues involving Stonehenge, which we'll talk about in a future Talk Skeptic to Me. What about sites which are created by one group and then later utilized another group? What does that tell us about those people? And this isn't limited to the past. People go, well, that's, how are you talking about ancient people? Placemaking theory is used today. And we use it quite a bit in modernity. For example, people have certain feelings when they go to the Lincoln Monument.
Thank you, the freak.
Right. And even like Arlington National Cemetery. The Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, for example, people are quiet. Right, there's an awe and a feeling of reverence while you're at sites like this. And is that a sociological phenomenon? Because I've heard of non-religious people acting in a similar manner. So you can have religious and societal norms that are also expressed in sites like this. So again, it's not just always for the religious, as much as it is sometimes forming societal norms of conduct and expressions of cultural solidarity, if you want to think of it that way. Beyond that, you have monumentalization. That's the act of adding a structure to make something more special than it was before. This can occur at sites that are already considered sacred. And this is like where Romans would come in after the Celts and build a temple to a site that the Celts already considered sacred. The Romans did it in order to add an additional layer of sacredness in their mindset to the local landscape and to give the gods their proper worship. But the site typically in this particular model would be something already held by an indigenous group like the Celts, and then was later added to by another group. In others, it's a result of event. So you can have a battle that occurs and a monument is set up after the battle. In this case, we have behind me the Tropaeum Traiani in Romania. Following the Battle of Adamclisi in 101-102, Trajan's armies defeat the Dacians. The Dacians are routed and largely captured and or exterminated, and he built both the Triumph Traiani, which the counterpart is Trajan's Column in Rome, a monumental altar at this site, and possibly a tomb, which is subject to some debate, near the settlement of Adamclisi, and a memorialization of the events that took place, both in descriptions in art and in inscriptions and text, relaying the events and the sacred nature, invoking gods, in this case Jupiter, Optimus, Maximus, for their defeat of the Dacians during this particular war. The intersection of history, religion, and folklore. I always like this one to give kind of like a nutshell what I do. In his description of the city of Marathon, which is next to where the Battle of Marathon was fought, and that should, their date's wrong, from Pausanias' description of ancient Greece. And this is what he writes. Here is also a separate monument to one man, Miltiades, son of Simon, although his end came later after he had failed to take Paros, and for this reason he became brought to trial by the Athenians. At Marathon, every night you can hear horses neighing and men fighting. No one who was expressly set himself to behold this vision has ever got any good from it. But the spirits are not wroth with such as in ignorance chance to be spectators. Basically, those who accidentally come upon the site and disturb the ghosts are usually left alone, but those who purposely go there in order to agitate them typically get no benefit from it. It's a dubious act. The Marathonians worship both those who died in the fighting, calling them heroes, and secondarily Marathon, from whom the parish derives its name, and then Heracles, saying that they were the first among Greeks to acknowledge him as a god. They say too that that there chanced to be present in the battle a man of rustic appearance and dress, having slaughtered many of the foreigners with a plow. He had been seen no more after the engagement, sort of a miraculous appearance. He, the plow tail, as a hero. A trophy too. Trophy is the setting up of shields and other memorial in ancient Greek context of white marble was erected, although the Athenians assert that they buried the Persians, because in every case the divine law applies that the corpse should be laid under the earth, yet I could find no grave or graves. There was neither mound nor trace to be seen, as the dead were carried to a trench and thrown in anyhow. So Pausanias actually determines that although the Athenians said they buried the defeated Persians properly, that they hadn't, and that was his explanation for why the ghosts at Marathon kept reenacting the battle and would trouble those who disturbed their rest. So this is an intersection. The Marathon was in antiquity was believed to be haunted. And
do we know that was true? Again, did they not really bury them properly? Was that a lie?
We don't know, but that was Pausanias says that he investigated and where they sent. Right, remember Pausanias is investigating this several hundred years after the facts.
Right,
and he's basically saying that he gathered from the locals that the Persians had been unceremoniously dumped into a pit rather than receiving a proper burial as the Greeks had, and that's the reason there's right. But this is the intersection of history, religion, and folklore, right? Like, religion, the Greeks believed proper burial. If you didn't receive proper burial, that your spirit would wander in the afterlife and you would become a restless spirit. Folklore, that the site was still haunted in his day, right? And then, the intersection of history, an actual historical event, 490, not 590 BCE. So, again, this is what happens when Pat throws a presentation together way too fast late at night for today's episode. Christian placemaking. Another thing that I'm doing is a case study. How were for ancient Christians, how were many of their most sacred sites created? In some cases, there was strong continuity with early religious practices, most often pagan, which were simply transferred to the new religion. This site was sacred before, it's going to be sacred now. In other cases, older locations were adopted and earlier practices were highly modified to fit within the context of new religions. An ancient Celtic spring, as we saw on Anglesey, was then adopted as a Christian baptistry. and still considered sacred, and a new mythology arose in the location. Lastly, sites were created, often by the association of particularly Christian beliefs. Examples include the tomb of Jesus, because it wasn't sacred before Jesus was quote-unquote buried there, and burials of various martyrs. I'm currently working on a chapter of a book of for an edited volume. And my submission is entitled "Made Sacred by the Blood of Martyrs: Placemaking in Moesia Inferior During the Early Christian Period." That will be released next year, and it actually details the entombment of martyrs at the archaeological site at Halmiris, where I excavate. Who we have in 2002, the tomb was excavated, both martyrs were found in place, and the church was built on top of them because the place where the martyrs had been buried was considered sacred, and for that reason worthy of the church being. Yes, it's at Murugo, Romania, is where Halmiris is located. And these two martyrs died during the Diocletian persecution. But there were no sacred sites on the spot, right? So there was no sacredness associated with the site prior to the interment of the two martyrs. But the two martyrs being buried there made the ground sacred. So for that reason, the site was considered hallowed.
Would they have been killed
still
there
considered hallowed
in the persecutions, or would they have been transported?
Yeah,
they were.
No, they were executed in the town by the local
by the local prefect.
Yeah. Right, correct. Military governor, and so that their bodies were during the reign of Constantine. The bodies were exhumed, placed into a proper crypt, and then the church built over on top of them. So we can talk about that more at another time. But I just want to give everybody kind of a thumbnail sketch of what I do. And that's what I do. And I apologize for the typos and missed attribution of dates, but like I said, this was 3:00 last night, and I was typing fast and not proofreading. And that's it.
No, it's a lot of information to try to condense into one thing. You know, years of study.
So, again, work. Yeah, and I apologize.
What happened?
Hmm? No, don't apologize. I thought it was awesome.
It should be like Gordon Ramsay and go like, first of all, I'd like to apologize for absolutely nothing because I'm the best.
And actually,
well, the worst thing is I'm reading it and I'm like, oh, it's $4.90, not $5.90. Like I don't know if you saw my face, but I was immediately dejected because I just typed it. I didn't proofread this as much as I should have, and I apologize.
You should.
Do we have some questions?
I was gonna say you should see my at least rough drafts. It is just seas of red. Absolute seas of red. It eventually looks good, but absolutely. In fact, I want to thank Pat for joining us tonight. James and I are going to just ask a few more queries. However, we are about to switch into our Q&A mode. So now is your chance to tag me at Amy Newman. And after that, we'll be going for some voice in the Discord server. Even more Pat. Double the Pat. 2 scoops.
Double the Pat. Yeah, Pat's feeling pretty dejected right now because he made a rookie error on the date of the Battle of Marathon. You guys don't realize, I'm just like, oh. I didn't even catch it when I did it.
But see, the thing is, you're probably maybe 1 or 2 other people might have noticed it, but everybody else would just gloss right over it. But it matters to you because you're the academic and you're the expert.
Right. And I didn't spell check it. I had shit today. I meant to go back and proofread this, but like I told James, I got hung up in another meeting at school.
Pat, F-C-U-S. What does that spell?
Fuck us.
A very great time.
Fuck us, Newman.
And all right, I see. Exactly right. I saw a precept on T-Jump server earlier, and it was absolutely hilarious. But okay, I see DeFreak sending in a question, which means that means there are officially 2 questions, so we are going to start our Q&A.
No,
we just have more science. Woohoo! And all right, I think it's actually still up there that I can bring it up. I think she went to bed, but Natalie had a question.
Thank you, Randolph. We got Randolph out there. Hey, Randolph.
Oh, Randolph in chat. Woohoo! Send him love, Randolph. The Godfather.
And I do want to take a minute to thank to thank Natalie because she's been really good about like looking at my other videos and giving me comments and suggestions, and having a geologist look at a bunch of rocks that I'm looking at is always helpful too, because I can go, what is it? What kind of rock is this again? And she goes, it's this kind of rock.
The rocks that they're building with, she can tell you where they were excavated from and when they were.
So I got to tell you something. A couple of the people on the excavation this summer, when I was going out and looking at all this stuff, had formal training in geology. Like they had undergraduates and degrees in geology in addition to archaeology. So I just started calling stuff BFR. And they go, what's BFR? I go, big fucking rock. That's when I write my notes. It's just a big fucking rock. Because, you're going to Stonehenge. What's Stonehenge? There's a bunch of big fucking rock. I mean, they were getting into all the geology and everything about it. Like and BFE. I always joke. I go, I'll just copy your stuff later. Like, you guys take notes on the actual what's what. I'm going to worry about the geospatial, parameters of this, and I'm going to take measurements. And you guys, right?
It's a big fucking rock. That's all it is.
Big fucking rock.
It's Grandpa. This is, remember, folks, this is what the creationists think that the atheists think that we came from.
Small fucking rock.
Yeah, there was one that was like 7 meters tall. So that's 21 feet, right? So we're standing around it. It's like a Volkswagen at its base, right? And it goes up to just a couple. Right. So we're sitting there, and remember that they're sunk in the ground, so that's part of it. Is you're only seeing the upper 2/3,
the iceberg effect kind of thing,
right? So,
don't shoot. Going in order. Hold on. Don't shoot. Order. But yes, keep on sending questions in. I think she actually, I'm sending love. But Natalie asks, were there any crossed multi-knotted ties like groupings? So this was when we were looking at the colorful ties.
Yeah, so part of what I was trying to do, and I'll be honest, it was a little bit sporadic, was to see how some of them were actually placed. Placement could be an important piece of evidence, so I was trying to catalog that. And in some cases, people had tied over the tops of other people, and whether or not that was a form of additional inclusion, right? Because I don't know if these people dedicated together or later dedications, right? So there's still a lot of data for me to go through on this, and I do know, at least in a couple of places, it looks like people purposely tied onto the same chain. And it looks like, based on weathering, that they were done at different dates. So there is quite a bit of varied ritual activity going on here, and some that could just be a personal manifestation, like I just want to do it this way, and some of it may be a little more. I did talk to a couple of modern pagans that were there on site, and they explained they were there for ritual purposes, and for whatever reason, one of them thought that I was mocking them by my mode of inquiry, but I just want to know why they were doing it a certain way. So obviously, right. So, but and again, I did talk to a lot of people when I was there. So.
Reminds me of that bridge in France where they have all the locks. You know what I'm talking about? Like all the padlocks on the side of the bridge, and people just keep connecting them. It's like a whole big thing of locks. And you know what I'm talking about, Amy? No, nobody knows. Okay.
Oh, I thought you were talking to Pat. I was looking at.
I was saying.
Oh no.
I guess nobody knows.
I'm sorry. What was the question?
It's like that. There's a bridge, I think, in France where they have just a bunch of people just put padlocks on it. And it's like entirely covered in padlocks, but it's similar ritual. They do it for good luck or whatever, but it's kind of similar to the tying the strands on, because then people go and maybe you tie yours onto another person's. Maybe it means something, maybe it doesn't, but maybe you don't have any other place to tie yours, so you tie it onto theirs. Probably different meanings in the whole thing of it.
Sounds really cool, though. In France, in Paris?
I don't know if it's in Paris. Yeah. Probably. Well, I mean, is there anything outside of Paris?
I think it is Paris. It's. I've been to the bridge. I can't remember.
Titan just posted.
I've been to Paris.
Term of it, yeah.
That's it. Yep.
And question from the freak. How long are your stints in Europe or whatever when you go for study?
Typically anywhere from 6 to 8 weeks. Like I'll be going over for a couple weeks during the winter, and then I'll be going out for 8 weeks next summer. So I typically spend anywhere from 8 to 10 weeks a year on sites. Not always the same site each time I go, but yeah. I usually excavate for a few, and then I do other surveys while I'm there.
Do you have to arrange ahead of time so that they have enough beer in stock before you get there? You want to show up.
They typically have enough. They have enough beer.
Okay.
Yeah, but no. Typically, it's access to the site. So, like a couple of the sites that we are going to be excavating next year, it's on farms. It's privately owned land. So we've obtained permissions, and they want it done during certain months.
Romania?
So we go up. No, this will be in the UK next year.
Oh, UK.
I don't know because of COVID and what's going on in Romania. It may be a couple years before we actually get back and resume excavations at Halmiras.
Is the pandemic hard there, or?
The pandemic is hard there, and also it's tapped them pretty bad financially.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So there's those concerns.
So the UK in this winter or coming up?
Yeah, I'll be going over in January.
Okay.
Which is not the best time to be going to England to try to do some archaeological stuff, but that's when
my window is. They're rainy. But hey, I would love to go. I just want to travel outside the States. I've been to Canada once in my life. Beyond that, I am basically a hamburger, an American hamburger.
The Bahamas once, or twice actually. That's my extent of my travels out of the U.S.
And so Randolph sending love. He's getting some nom-noms. But I will say, keep on sending those questions in. Tag me at Amy Newman. And if you don't catch us, we will be heading to the Discord. So you can ask even more questions.
Discordy questions.
Kathy asks... Oh, what were you going to say?
No, go ahead.
Hi, Kathy. Question for Pat. Have you ever read or heard about any of Graham Hancock's works on these archaeological sites?
Yes. I'm familiar with his work. I'll put it in air quotes. So Graham Hancock's a graduate of the University of Durham, which is a pretty respected school for archaeology. I do know that his work his conclusions have been described as pseudo-archaeological, and it's been basically rejected by mainstream scholarship as being at the nicest thing you can say about it, it's fanciful. Worst case, it's basically conspiracy theory level stuff. So I wouldn't use his work. I'm familiar with it.
Brief explanation of what his work entails, or?
So he mixes a lot of different things. Not that some of the basis of what he. Solar calendars are a real thing we observe at some sites, but Hancock takes his stuff pretty far out there. I'm not going to say he's ancient aliens level, but he's definitely in that ballpark. Direction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Guys, I'm not saying it's aliens, but
right. Yeah. So like I know that he's written books, right? And one of the challenges that I don't know, it's probably in the last 10 years. I've actually had people like before this conversation, like, hey, what do you think of Hancock's work, right? Like students and so I looked into him. If I remember correctly, he's submitted probably half a dozen papers, and he's never gotten one through peer review. Because people are like, this is nonsense. So he's never had an actual paper published in an academic journal, although he writes books, right? And kind of the thing is, if you're going to write a book about a theory that you have, you submit a few papers and at least get it kicked around a little bit. Even if it's not approved, it makes through peer review. And really, everything that I've seen of his is pseudoscientific and pseudo-archaeological. And it is some some of his anthropological modeling is really just not anything that anybody engages in. I mean, again, he writes a lot of popular books because people think he's like discovered Atlantis, although that's actually, he doesn't, I don't think he's actually commented on Atlantis, but I mean, those are the kind of things he goes out there on. So yeah, I'm familiar with his work in a general way. I don't use it with my own work at all.
From DeFreak. Also, please ask Pat if he receives funding for his work or his own expense, and how much each season costs approximately.
So I get some funding for my actual excavation, like my costs of equipment, because sometimes I have to rent like specialized equipment to do what we do. And again, I'm never alone. I'm with a group of people. Like, this is a group project. My projects are part of a larger project. So, you know, depending on who's funding and how much money, but as far as my travel, I pay for it. As far as my tuition for school, I cover it. And I end up, you know, covering my costs of going over and living in the UK. But sometimes the cost of, you know, equipment rental and stuff like that is covered by the institution. So I largely pay my own bills. So, you know, flying to and from the UK, you know, about $1,000 each time I go to and from. Stay for 4 to 6 weeks, depends. Sometimes I get to stay in a hotel or an Airbnb. That can be more expensive, but a lot of times I end up camping on site. Like this last summer, about a third of the time I spent was called field time because I didn't stay in a house or a hotel. I literally stayed in a tent on site in order to do my survey. So the cost can vary. Sometimes some people let you camp on their property for free. Some people charge you. So you just kind of
charge you to pitch a tent out there on the site. Wow.
Well, no, if you're at a campground, they charge you. But typically, the problem with camping on someone's private property is there's no toilet facilities. So you try to stay in campgrounds whenever possible. If you have to stay on someone's site, then you have to deal with that. And I will tell you, there's nothing worse. I mean this. There's nothing worse during the raining part of the summer in Wales or Scotland or wherever you happen to be. You're in a field full of sheep shit, and it's raining, and there's no bathrooms.
Oh boy.
So, like, I've had to take shovels and move like pounds of sheep shit out of the way so I can put my tent down. So, it's fun, but there are the logistical issues concerning it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I find it fascinating, but if I want to complain about anything, it's sheep feces.
Shoveling shit.
Yep. So you can set up your tent.
And okay. Question from Sunday Worship. Ooh, he got in late. Oh, we're just happy you're here. Sending love, Sunday. I love ancient history and classical history. Hopefully it's not too off topic, but I'd like to ask Pat if he has any recommendations for historical fiction books. I love a good story set in ancient/classical Mediterranean, but I always wonder how well researched the authors are about their historical setting.
Some are good, some are bad, but if I was going to recommend one author, I like Stephen Pressfield. I've read a couple of his books. So they're pretty good. But again, this is the problem with historical fiction. As people read historical fiction, they think it's history. And so you got to kind of take it with a grain of salt.
Some history.
If you're looking, yeah, Pressfield's pretty good. And I wish I had time to read stuff for fun. I typically don't because I'm reading stuff for school. So I plan on reading stuff for fun sometime in the future.
Mm-hmm. From Randolph. Sending love, Randolph. Question for Pat. What were some of the most dangerous adventures you've had heading on-site archaeology?
I don't know if I'd classify archaeology as dangerous. We've had some dangerous things happen, like in a backswing, the head of a pick coming off. So you got this like 30-pound pointy object flying by someone's head, and you're just surprised no one died. Some of these sites I've gone into some, late Neolithic. I'll have video of it, but I've crawled into some of these cairns or tombs on my hands and knees on my elbows going back to go, because they're only 18 inches, right? And you got to go back like 18 feet, 20 feet to get to the actual burial chamber. And you can get in there if you're willing to do it. But between fighting spiders and all the other stuff that you have to do to get to the back to the cyst area where the body was actually contained, sometimes you know, if you're claustrophobic, not the job for you. But I'm not, so I'm okay. And I usually get told, well, you know, it's like climbing under a house, right? And I'm like, exactly. And I don't mind doing that either. So I've had places where I crawled into my like, you know, low crawled with my elbows is my locomotion to get into some sites, and then had to do the exact same thing on the way out. And I'm not the thinnest guy, but there are people that are larger than me that would have got stuck. They just physically couldn't have done it.
Woohoo!
So, not a job for big guys.
They weren't giant spiders. They're just big spiders.
Yeah.
So definitely super claustrophobic. It'd be hard to get
not
to some
super
of these
straight,
places.
super claustrophobic.
Not super claustrophobic. That word super, I swear, you can. I'm trying to use the word super less. I'm trying to use the word very less, because those two words are just, they're like ums of the
Well, they're
English
like
language.
super archaeology. Just kidding.
Super archaeology. No, I mean that word. See, unless you're in front of Wendy's and McDonald's, you probably shouldn't supersize anything. But what is up, Robert?
Hey, Robert.
And all right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go for like 10 or 15 more minutes, and then we'll head over.
I do want to point out, Sunday Warship said a true Scotsman should feel right at home in the pounds of sheep shit. I'm not Scottish. It's my wife's flag. So,
she's the Scot. You're
the Greek.
She's Welsh, yeah. Welsh, Scotch,
wow,
Irish.
okay.
You know.
Close.
A little bit of that. I call her a Celtic mutt because she's very proud of it. But I'm like, you know, let's not do your ancestry.com because you're gonna be sad. So. Yeah.
Woo-hoo. Yep, I'm looking.
Wow, I really doubt Pat's read any of Graham Hancock's. Well, what do you want me to criticize in particular? The schools he went to, which I knew, or do you want me to criticize the fact that he has never had a published paper that's passed academic review? You've asked me, like, it's been years since I looked at his stuff. So if you want me to critique it, I'll come back to you. But then if you're going to do that, I expect you to do as much reading as I have. So if I have to go read a book so I can critique it in detail, when I didn't take notes. And if his stuff was credible, it'd be on my bookshelf. And it's not, because it's not credible within academic circles. So
if it was credible, it would
again,
be on the bookshelf.
Saying I doubt, like if I hadn't, and I have like several bookshelves in my office. There's probably 200 books in here. This is just a selection that I use quite a bit. And that's one thing I'm going to take this pretty well. If I haven't read something, I'm the first person to say I haven't read it or I'm unfamiliar with it, right? But he's a kook. And so I read it so I could stay away from it. And like I said, I didn't read everything he wrote, but I read enough to realize he's a kook because I looked into his work because I was asked by a student, right? So, if you're going to come on and say, I doubt you've done something, well, I doubt you've read, several really good, credible academic texts on archaeology too, because you're going to believe his bullshit. So you have no foundation to even say his stuff is credible because you have no background in the field, right?
If you spend years in the field, you might read it and you have a totally different take on it.
Hancock's the kind of people that real archaeologists sit around and make fun of over beers and dinner. Like that general milieu of what people like him do. So again, I'm done, but that's my moment. Like if I hadn't read his stuff, I would say, and like I said I've read some. I didn't say I read all. I read enough to be critical of it. That's all I needed to do. And I didn't take notes because it was useless for my research.
Sup, stripper liquor.
Right.
Amaretto out there.
I will, for you, the one place that I did look at, and I have some notes, but I can't do it off the top of my head. When we talk about Stonehenge, because it's a site that I instruct on, I will be more than happy to go over some of Hancock's theories, and I use that term very loosely when we talk about Stonehenge in an upcoming episode, maybe in a few months from now.
Pat, are you trying to say you're going to get a really strong grip of this Hancock? You're really going to understand?
No. Again, Hancock is. I will say one thing. he has popularized archaeology and phenomenology. So his work, again, it's just, the problem is if he wants to be taken seriously, he's got to do the work and getting his work published. And I know he thinks he's like an out of the box thinker, and I can't remember if it's in his prologue or on the back page of his book. He makes a big thing about my work is not accepted by mainstream scholarship, right? He has this kind of protest. And I didn't think I was going to come on and do a 5-minute thing about Graham Hancock, but the issue is that he presents himself as the victim, but there is a system for getting your work published and reviewed. And maybe some of his less harebrained shit would be received better if he didn't conflate it with all the other stuff that he's putting out there, right? I mean, you got to pick and choose what you want to defend and have published. So again, it's not an easy road to hoe at all.
And he is saying that he really. So your thoughts more specifically? How about just on Stonehenge? Well,
okay, on Stonehenge, there is quite a bit of issues regarding, so. This again, Graham starts at like solar calendars, protection of religious ritual, which isn't too far off, but then he builds on that. So some of the things about, solar calendars and ritual activity that took place at the site, you can go with. I know he has a big thing about, I think it's called like the Orion hypothesis, right? It's not, if it wasn't mixed in with all of his other stuff, it might be something worth taking a look at. But, like I said, I have notes on it from when I read it a couple years ago, and when we do an episode on Stonehenge, I'll pull it out. And but no, I didn't pull out my notes.
Always a great phrase.
I was gonna say.
Well, no, and that's unless it's something unless it's someone I read all the time. If I read something and I don't really care for it, I just have margin notes. I stick it in a book and I come back to it because I don't have time to keep it all straight in my head because it's not right in what I'm doing, right? So it's like asking me. I read 300 magazines a year and asking me, hey, in issue 42. What'd you think of this? I'm like, I don't remember issue 42. I read it. It's in my list of shit I read, but I don't remember it. Oh, that guy, he said the thing about the thing. Okay, I kind of remember it, but I can't quote it, right? So it's kind of where I am with Graham Hancock.
And Randolph Richardson says, a debunking of these works while explaining Stonehenge sounds like a cool idea for an episode.
Absolutely.
Right on par. Great minds think alike.
Thanks, Randolph. Fucking dick. He's like, hey, I'm going to volunteer Pat to do 100 push-ups. I'm just kidding. Woo-hoo! Thanks, man. No, I do want to do Stonehenge. Stonehenge is I think there's a lot of misconceptions about Stonehenge, particularly how it was used, when it was used, how many generations did it take to build Stonehenge? How old's the site? How was the site changed over time? The site was modified several times during its history. Again, we'll do that in a future episode, but it's fascinating. Anybody familiar with the site knows that Stonehenge.
When was it constructed or
so so there is a wooden issue, like there's wooden poles at Stonehenge, right? There's an outer ring, but that's the wood ring at Stonehenge that was on site, right? So, Stonehenge can be as early, depending on how you want to date things, 3000 BCE, 2700.
Oh, wow.
It's continuing to be used through 2400. There's another major phase of construction. Remember, I'm doing this off the top of my head, and this is not the area of my focus, so I apologize for getting into this. But it's Stonehenge has at least got a period of use of anywhere between 800 to 1,000 years. And then after it's no longer used by the people who constructed it at various times, it's going to be inherited by other groups during the Iron Age. Even the Romans are going to go out there and they're going to think it's an ancient temple. And a sacrificial site. So you have emperors that are going out there and during their surveys of Britain are going to stop and camp near it and kind of feel the what's this place because Stonehenge is an amazing spot. So it takes your breath away. Phenomenology, the experience of being there. Like if I wasn't an atheist and I was kind of pro Jesus or pro spirituality, I could just feel it. But you just have to engage wonderment, I guess.
The one thing about Stonehenge I think people have a hard time comprehending, but I think it should just give us a deeper appreciation as we go, how the hell this many years ago were they able to do something
BCE.
that many of us today can't even wrap our if they gave us an engineering product and said, go out there and rebuild something like Stonehenge, none of us would be able to do it without amazing, technology.
You need
and
a
so we go,
yeah.
we go, holy moly! They couldn't have possibly done it back then because that was so long ago. But no, there were smart people doing very amazing things because humans are kind of awesome.
Well, we also don't understand the idea in our like Stonehenge was a great accomplishment. Again, as far as megalithic sites are concerned, right? But it's a monument to, it's a cultural meeting point. It's a spot of religious worship. Stonehenge was everything from a meat market to church all rolled into one. Gathering site for, this is where people went to trade their kids to get married. Like, hey, marry outside your clan, marry this girl or that. It served multiple purposes in all likelihood, right? So, so this is the issue, right? The calendar features are pretty much determinative at Stonehenge. So they're, as far as solar alignments and stuff, which probably have to do with sunsets as much as sunrises, but that's a different issue. But the issue that, like, with a thing like Stonehenge is these societies, these cultural groups, it was a maximal effort to build. Everybody participated. So it was the entire community coming together. Imagine if everybody in your city decided they were going to build something. You could get a lot done.
Sure.
It isn't just skilled laborers, like a few guys working on this, like in a modern context, like building a building. So we go, oh, there's no way they could do it because we scale things down to our modern concept. We don't have an idea of, A, it's going to take 2 generations to build it, and they just understood that when they started the process. And B, while the construction was going on, everybody worked on it. Like, it was the entire community, or a large section of the community that devoted all their time and effort during certain seasons to do this. So it is Herculean in its size, but not in its inability to be done. So
yeah, it seems impossible when it's just one of us, but when you got the whole town, you can actually get things done.
Right. And it's important. Like, it was the most important thing. Having these ritualized centers of worship in antiquity are like, they're the focal points for communal life, right? And you may not use them every day. They're not like, in many ways, they're not like a church, right? Where you show up every week and you do your thing. These may only be like a seasonal activity. You may only go there 2 or 3 times a year. But when you go, like a place like Stonehenge, we know that Stonehenge gathered people from a large area around, just because of the objects deposited there, right? So you can kind of start going, okay, where'd this pottery come from? Is it local to this area? No, it's actually from 150 miles away, So people are migrating to Stonehenge to conduct these or take part in these religious rituals that are going on there. Different clan groups, if you want to think of it as a clannish structure, they're meeting. This is how, in a way, you make sure that this eases a lot of the social tension between competing ethnic, or not ethnic groups, but tribal groups. So, I mean, this is why it's not just Stonehenge. There's stone circles all over the UK. I mean, you can't, in Cornwall and Wales, you can't, I'm not going to say what I want to say. You can't go to the bathroom without hitting a stone circle, it seems like. I mean, you can drive down the road, there's one every 15 minutes, right? I mean, they were all over the place.
And with that in mind, Scapegoat asks, according to how Stonehenge aligns with sunrise on that particular day, how much, if any, change in the alignment since it was set?
Well, there's a lot of issues with the actual people that study solar alignment, and the basically theoretical concepts of solar calendars. We know they existed because in some cases it's been demonstrated pretty well. One of the problems with Stonehenge is, you got to remember, the Stonehenge you see today isn't how Stonehenge looked a while ago. Stones have been re-erected. Archaeologists and antiquarians have done their best to put it back the way it should be, but there's no guarantee we're actually getting it 100% right. Second thing is that the Earth isn't in the exact same position that it was when these monuments were erected, right? There is, I'm not an astrophysicist, but astrophysicists tell us that there's a blank shift between what it would have been 5,000 years ago and what it would be today. Can we measure for that in our theoretical model where we're doing this analysis? Yeah, usually we can. And so some people have done a lot of work. And what we've noticed that sunrises and sunsets are very common features of solar calendars, and then transition through solstices through seasonal periods are also very common. Beyond that, it gets to be subject to a lot more conjecture. And a lot of sites, the solar alignment is episodic to sunset. So if you're looking for a sunrise alignment, you're not going to find it because you only have a certain period, a certain season at a certain time, and it's a sunset rather than a sunrise. In some places, it could be a sunrise. So you got to know what you're looking at in for calendars. And I'll be honest, that field is so specialized. I rely completely on the experts in that. Like, if someone is established and their work's past peer review and it seems credible, I just take it at the face. I don't try to reproduce it because that's not what my research focus is. My research focus is, once the site's established and having a context to it as being a sacred site, how does my job is, okay, it's sacred. How do people interact with it? What were the ritual activities going on there? As the site goes into decline, how's it transferred in? How's it either abandoned and or transferred to another belief system? That's where my research focus is. If I did it all on my own, I would never get it done. Like, that's just the reality of it.
And so we're going to go on for just about 5 more minutes before we let Pat do his closing statement of the night. So send questions in. Now's your chance at Amy Newman. But you can still join us afterwards on Discord if you missed your burning desire questions. And woohoo! What is up, Buzz? Tang Gang, yo.
OZ.
They were just having a fantastic, fun call-in show.
Yep.
Sending love to I can't help but chill. Tart and Tang.live, baby. Woohoo!
Well, let's not get crazy. So I am going to go back and apologize and put in the notes for 490 instead of 590. I'm just dejected. All right. So let's go ahead, and that's what happens when you do stuff off the top of your head and you're typing real fast.
Well, I want to ask, is there a specific, like, when you go to a site, you start to just try and collect and build a picture, as in, like, do you try and just separate do you have like religion bins in your head, as in, like, we have Christianity here, but we can kind of look under here and it was pagan, and then it was maybe even the nomadic under here? And
well, at least luckily in my sites in the UK, I don't have to worry about nomads. No, but so really, archaeology is limited by what you can find in the ground. So in some places, either time and or the untraceability of ritual. Everything leaves an archaeological record, sort of, right? But many cases we can't discover it. And that's kind of what I do, Amy. I research the site first. Like, I read everything I can. Like, I'm going to a site, I pull site reports, and I read them. I take a lot of notes. I have notebooks. And then when I go out to the site, I go, okay, I'm looking for this, I'm looking for that. I'm trying to see, other people have talked about the region, so I'm trying to look at it, take something broad and put it into something specific. But yeah, it's kind of what I do is I go out and I kind of just start asking, okay, why is this? And is that, I start, the one thing I've noticed is that there's quite a bit of blending, particularly in antiquity. We see a lot of ritual being propagated in a pagan/Christian context, particularly, in the period post-Roman Britain, for example. We see quite a bit of cultural blending. There was a lot of preservation of local pagan, non-Christian tradition that was blended into Christianity. And that seems to be quite a bit. Like, we know like at St. Gwenfeyn's Well, that the church was established, right, not far away, and that the site was known, like there's a bog right next to that well that you saw, where we know that there's votive deposits that ancient Celts, non-Christians, came and deposited items sacred to the well. Now, looking out over that cliff, there being a natural well there, if you go to the site and you look around, you're like, I can totally see why someone thinks the gods come here. And this site, water in Celtic religious tradition is a liminal space. It's a transition element. The gods are on the other side. So if you're trying to reach the gods, throwing stuff in a bog or a river or a lake was a way the ancient Celts believed that you were offering sacrifice to the divine. Often you'd mutilate the object or twist it up, you throw it in there. But that's why, right. So we know that site was already identified in Anglesey as a Iron Age Celtic usage site and depositing site. There's been enough archaeology in the area to show that, yeah, they pulled up a lot of stuff. It matches what we'd expect. So we're not going to dig up the whole thing. We did like a test area. We're happy with the conclusion. We don't have to wreck everything. Right. Because that's what archaeology does. Sometimes it wrecks stuff. But then you see, just a little bit, within a couple hundred feet, there's this Christian well, right? And the well was probably also a spring site that was used during the Celtic period, but then it was completely built up, stoned in, the walls were erected, and probably served as a collection point for water in addition to a baptistry, right? So as you're converting these Celts, you go to a site that they already consider sacred, and then you add a new level of ritual activity on top of it. So yes, it's about blending, right? And really,
have you ever
a lot of what I do
commercials? Oh, I'm sorry. Finish your statement. I can make my joke.
I just have to keep a really open mind when I'm looking at the ritual activity. Like I don't ever just try to put things in a Christian box or a pagan box. When I'm 5 years ago, I would have put stuff in little boxes. And when I realized there are no boxes, there may be boxes, but they're more often than not boxes.
People doing things according to their culture. Go ahead, Amy.
There is no box. Do you know what it reminds me of? You ever see the bath fitter advertisements? They're just like, do you have that old religion? Don't worry, we can just put a new religion right on top. Wow, looks brand new.
In Scotland, not till too recently. I mean, this tradition's largely died out now, though there are a few people that still practice it. I don't know if they do it because they really believe in it or because it's a rejection of culture, right? That's another issue I have to deal with is someone doing it just because they're Scottish, whether or not they believe it or not. But, some women in Scotland used to carry in their dresses, the pockets of their dress would carry stones that they either broke off or found next to standing stones or stone circles or some objects that were, ancient magic sites, right? That's how they interpreted it for fertility. You're having a problem getting pregnant. Carry an old stone or a druid stone in your pocket, right? Now, if you're a good Christian, because most of these women were during this time period, you would say, well, that's a pagan practice. That's where you can't have these boxes so narrowly defined that you exclude the possibility that that's this region's projection of religiosity, religious activity, ritual activity. And just because it doesn't fit nicely within a modern Christian concept, well, they're practicing pagan tradition. Sure they are, but it seemed like a lot of women in Scotland were doing it. So
yeah,
is it really Christianity or just Christo-paganism in Scotland? Because they blended the traditions.
It's a nice blend. Probably, it's like a mixed drink.
You probably see a little bit of that everywhere it goes.
Right. Actually, it's a lot more than you think. That's what I realize now. Okay, I'm done.
Thank you so very much. Randolph says that was very fitting. Thank you so very much. And then the last question of the night. What are the hopes of possibly achieving items from the bugs?
I think he means bogs.
Bogs.
Yeah, bogs.
We actually get a lot of it. Archaeologists love bogs. Bogs have some logistical nightmares. Like on Anglesey, just so you know, if whether or not a group actually excavates at Gwenfeyan's well, which is there's already groups that have gone out and done a little bit, like we call them test trenches. So they're little excavated areas. Whether or not that ever actually gets formally excavated, I'm on the list of if you need someone, call me. Whether or not that'll actually ever be excavated, I'll let you know.
Talk skeptic to me, baby.
But so yes, they get excavated all the time. but you have to drain them first, so you have to get permission from landowners. Yeah, but yeah, we do all the time. Some of the best archaeological finds that we have, the British Museum, some of the best finds in the British Museum and the National Museum of Scotland are from bogs. Like we find people in bogs, which is awesome too, because you find almost a whole body, and they were bog sacrifices,
mummified,
because ritually strangulized and then thrown into a bog. Oh, it's awesome. Yeah, we'll talk about bog people another time. But yeah,
ladies and gentlemen, religion,
bog people.
To be fair, they were ritually strangulized during the pagan period, so it was pagan human sacrifice
under the pagan era in Scotland.
Oh, we got one last one. I'm trying to sneak it in for you, Sunday worship.
Okay.
Is Pat familiar with the Old English poem "The Ruin" from the Book of Exeter? And does he have an Exeter? And does he have an opinion about whether it's about a specific place?
I haven't read it. I know that it exists, and I just, I got too many other distractions. Yeah. No, I don't. I mean, I know some people have tried to figure it out, and that's where kind of like archaeology and literary scholarship kind of go hand in hand, right? I'm too busy reading site reports on stuff that's come out of the ground. I would love to. I haven't had the time yet. Yeah, those are the kind of things I'd love to read.
And all right, with that, we're just going to switch into, we're just going to have a outro. We're going to hand it over to Pat, because I hope you had fun on this episode of Talk Skeptic to Me, Sacredness in Archaeological Approach. We will be heading on to the Discord server, the link of which is in the description below.
Thank you, Rachel.
Woohoo! Yes.
I think we all learned a lot of knowledge, a lot to learn. Wow. And the freak said that Christians are the only non-superstitious people.
Sure, you can believe that.
We love
I do want to just counter with this. Born again Christians believe that putting water all over your body cleanses you from a purification that you had no responsibility for actually having come upon you. So if that's not superstition, I don't know what is. But we'll go with that. Thanks for having me on.
The special water. And okay, actually, we're gonna give you your last few minutes.
If you want anything you want to tie a bow on.
But Pat, thank you so much. We have been Talk Skepticing to Me with our special guest host,
Sacred Sites,
Pat Lowinger,
from Archaeology.
Sacredness in Archaeological Approach. I hope you had a great time, Pat. Where can people find you? In fact, what are you doing lately? And what are your final thoughts?
So I'm still working on revisions to my book, which are coming out at the beginning of next year, February, hopefully not March, but those are the 2 months we're projected. And you can look for that title, Betrayed: The Orthodox Subjugation of Women in the Early Christian Church. And it'll be available through Simon & Schuster. And so as soon as I get the actual date of release, you guys I'll punch it up there. But I'm working on my blog, Discovering Ancient History at WordPress.com. I launched my YouTube channel, of which this is one of the videos of. I apologize for not proofreading. It's actually a little bit of embarrassing, but we'll work on that for next time. And I, as always, want to thank James and Amy for having me on, because I love coming on and talking about what I do. No, I don't translate the ancient Hebrew from the original Aramaic or anything like that. I'm studying the projection of religion and religious tradition as it's represented in material culture and placemaking throughout the Mediterranean. So that's what I do. Hey, but Pat, you're studying Britain, right? We study in Britain too, because it's religions that are projected from the region, from the Mediterranean. But thanks for having me on. I like to talk about my research, and this is what I do. So thank you very much.
Thank you. We can't get enough of it. We are addicts.
We are Pat addicts. And in fact, if you're a Pat addict, we're about to have 2 scoops. But I hope you all had a fun time on this episode.
And listen, you don't want to be the guy out there that's not subscribed to Pat Lowinger. I'm sorry, Amy. He needs to have at least 10 more subscribers from this.
We need to get him to 10. We need to get him to his 100. Ladies and
I'm
gentlemen,
assuming most of them are already subscribers, but if you're not, don't be that guy who's not a subscriber.
That's right. We got to get him up to that 100 so he can get that sexy title, that name. And okay, I hope you all had a fun time on this episode of Talk Skeptic to Me. Woohoo!
Not yet,
Sacredness in archaeological approach. Oh my. Where just as stated, we took an archaeological approach to sacredness.
Thank you
with our special guest host, Pat Lowinger. Woo-hoo.
Amazing. Juicy. Amazing.
That's so right. So juicy. Some people are saying it's the best. But if you're feeling fancy, don't forget to like, follow, or subscribe and hit that bell icon so that you can be part of our live streams after the show. I've been saying it like a billion times. We're going over the Discord so you can have some voice questions with Pat. And the link of which is in the description below. Speaking of links below, if you would like to help us support and make even more fun content, you can find our Patreon page at patreon.com/Amy Newman. I want to send one more thanks to Pat Lowinger, my co-host James W., and myself. Amy Newman is going to tell you we'll see you all on the next episode of Skeptic Ball Z. Good night, everyone.
Good night, guys. Grab your shake weights, Amy.